Hi everyone! So today is going to be the final video this week on how to write a narrative. We're getting down to the wire, and by now you should be fairly comfortable with the different parts that make up a narrative. We're going to focus on what we should be looking at when you start writing your narrative. And the last two videos were basically the information that you needed to know before you started. So I want you to think for a second. What is the proper order of the elements of the plot? What are the four types of conflict? And what is an exposition? If you can answer those questions, you're ready to move on. If not, you may want to go back and watch the previous videos again. But for those of you who are ready to move on, let's get started. So the first thing that needs to be considered is the sequence. This means that the information and events that you're talking about in your story or narrative are in the proper order. And the only time that jumping forward or jumping back is okay is when you're doing a flashback or a flash forward, but it needs to be extremely obvious to the reader that that's exactly what you're doing. Otherwise, they're going to get really confused, and it's not going to make any sense if you're just jumping back and forth a lot. You should only probably use one flashback or flash forward in your paper if you decide to use it at all. I recommend against it, but if you think that you can and you think that it fits your story, you can use one. There are three main rules for writing a narrative. We're going to get more detailed on these rules in just a second, but I want you to be extremely aware of these rules. Write them big, write them bold, highlight them, underline them, do something to make sure that you know these rules. The first rule is know your audience. The second rule is have a story in mind. And the third rule, and probably the most important, is be descriptive. I will show you a specific example of how to be descriptive at the very end of this presentation. So rule number one is, again, to know your audience. Your reader is going to be your most important concern. So you need to vary your word choice, vary the types of imagery that you use, and make it exciting and full of action in a way that is appropriate for your audience and appropriate for your story. You want to make your reader excited to read your story and excited to finish it. You want them to be craving to know what's happening next as they're reading it. Rule number two is to have a story in mind. This doesn't mean that you have the entire story mapped out in your head, and when you're given a prompt, you completely disregard it and just write the story you have memorized. That's not what I'm saying when I say have a story in mind. This just means have a character, even something as simple as like what the name of a character is if you know that the character is a male versus a female. Have a setting just in case it's not already provided for you in the prompt. And have an idea of a problem and a resolution that this person could face if it's not already provided for you in the prompt. A lot of times the prompt is going to provide you with this information and you just have to give the detail around that. But sometimes it may be something as simple as a picture where you're just describing what's happening. Your narrative needs to compel your reader to listen or read your story. So it has to be interesting and it has to sound like it's planned out, even if you're only given a set amount of time to do it. Rule number three, this one is, again, the most important. I don't even think 3 exclamation points is enough for the emphasis that this one needs, but you have to show your reader what is happening rather than just telling the story. You need to use words that create a sensory experience so that the reader can imagine exactly what is happening in the story. If you're describing something that you're cooking, the reader should be able to imagine what that smells like and what it sounds like and all of that. The use of this detail is going to make your story more interesting and more exciting for the reader to read. And again, that's your entire objective, is to make it something that the reader does want to finish reading. So showing, not telling. This is going to be how you're being descriptive. Showing, not telling is descriptive language, or language that's used to paint a picture in the mind of the reader so that they can imagine the scene that you're describing to them. This helps the reader understand your narrative a little better and feel connected to the author and to the characters. So on the next 2 slides, I have an example of showing and I have an example of telling. And they're the exact same scene. I just want you to look at them and listen to me read them, and I want you to tell me which one you think is the best example or the one that you would want to read the most, okay? So the first one that we're going to look at is telling. And again, these are going to be the exact same scenario. This one I'm going to tell you what happened, and in the next one I'm going to show you what happened. So I got up at 6 a.m. I got annoyed with the alarm and got hurt when I hit the clock too hard. I got into the shower. I got chilled because my sister had used up all of the hot water. I got dressed. I got into the kitchen after all of the eggs and toast were gone. I got myself a breakfast of cereal and juice. I got a stain on my shirt. I got a different shirt. So think about that one as I'm reading you the next one, and tell me again, which one would you rather listen to, or which one would you rather read? I woke up to the alarm screaming and slammed my hand down on the clock to make it stop. I rolled out of bed and stumbled into the bathroom to take a hot shower. To my surprise, when I stepped under the water, it was ice cold. I fumbled to get dressed and walked downstairs to eat my favorite breakfast, but when I opened the fridge, all of the eggs were gone. Instead, I decided to have cereal and orange juice, but I spilled the juice and got a stain all the way down the front of my favorite blue shirt. So, which one makes you want to read the story more? I personally think that the showing one is a lot more interesting because of the descriptive language that it uses and the varying line lengths, and it's not so repetitive with the I got. So the varying of the use of the words and how the sentences start just make it a much smoother read. It doesn't sound so choppy. But I want to hear your opinion. So if you want to comment below and tell me what you think of the, which one you think you like best and why, I will be so glad to hear that. So I hope you guys have a great understanding of how to write a narrative now that you guys are ready to start writing yours. We will talk in class about any questions that we may have after this point. But other than that, I hope you guys have a good day. Bye.